All right, welcome everybody. I'm Justin Stevens, COO of Desert Waters Correctional Outreach and co-facilitator of today's event, the Ring Resiliency Program, trauma-informed boxing and peer support out of Suffolk County House of Corrections in Boston. The Ring Resiliency Boxing Program is trauma-informed. Boxing program is a 6-week non-contact trauma-informed boxing program. The program's goals are to help support officers deal with high stress environment of the profession. The program offers benefits from the physical and mental well-being of officers by providing a boxing workout where officers engage in physical activity, which can reduce stress and tension. Officers then take part in a facilitated circle process where participants engage in mindful conversation, which can lead to better management of stress, build resiliency, and peer support. Our guests today run the program, and I'm excited to introduce them both to you now. Deputy Bill Farrell. Deputy Bill Farrell was born and raised in Boston and has been serving the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department since 2007. He and his wife, Gidget, recently celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary. Congratulations. And
Thank
they are
you.
proud parents of 2 young adult sons. Since 2015, Bill has served as an Employee Assistance Program officer, supporting fellow officers and their families through stress, trauma, and addiction. With nearly 40 years in recovery, Bill brings both professional experience and personal insight to his work. He is deeply committed to helping others navigate difficult moments, find perspective, and move towards a healthier, more resilient life. Also with us, we have Karen Lashinsky, PhD. Dr. Lashinsky brings years of experience in trauma healing, working with correctional officers, incarcerated individuals, formerly incarcerated people, and survivors of violent crime. Her work focuses on fostering self-awareness, compassion, and resilience through trauma-informed practices. She is the founder of the Ring Resiliency Boxing Program, a non-contact trauma-informed program designed to help correctional staff reduce stress. Karen also developed the CARE program, which uses restorative healing circles to address the impacts of trauma, violence, and incarceration. In addition, she co-directed the film Behind the Wall, which sheds light on the often overlooked effects of trauma within correctional systems. She holds a PhD in sociology from Northeastern University and a master's in social work from Boston University. And then for those of you that are not familiar with us, we're Desert Waters Correctional Outreach. We are a 501c3 nonprofit incorporated in Colorado in 2003, 23 years ago. Our mission is to improve the well-being of corrections and other public safety professionals through training, consulting, and other essential resources to foster resilience, mental health, and overall well-being in these challenging professions. Please visit us at desertwaters.com. And also on LinkedIn and Facebook. If you like what we do in these free webinars, please like us and subscribe on YouTube. Today's session is being recorded, so if you must leave before the end, you can find it posted to our YouTube channel soon. Please stay muted for the duration of the event, and if you have any questions, please post them in the chat, and we'll answer them. We'll have a question and answer at the end. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Deputy Director, Stephanie Rawlings.
Hey, everybody. We are really excited to have Mr. Farrell and Dr. Lashinsky on today's webinar. And we're going to do this kind of interview style. We're going to do some Q&A back and forth about the program. And if at any time we don't cover something that you want to know more about, or you have an additional question, we're going to collect those in the chat throughout the presentation. And then at the very end, any questions that we don't get to in our interview, we will reserve some time for questions in the chat that Justin will be collecting. I see some of you telling us where you're from. Feel free, if you're comfortable, to drop in the chat where you're joining us from today. We're always curious where our listeners and viewers are coming from, and we are certainly excited to jump right in. So, Bill and Karen, first of all, I'm gonna try my best not to appropriate your accent because it's beautiful, but it's also super energetic and contagious. I'm also a Yankee living in the deep South, so I understand accents and how all of that works.
Stephanie, you said Yankee. You had
Yeah,
me.
We'll let
I
that go.
immediately went into defensive mode.
We'll let it go. Let it go, Bill. Be a professional.
let
All
it go.
right,
Let it
we're
go.
good. You
You,
said deep south. You didn't say New York. No offense to New Yorkers out there.
we're gonna have to do a ring here at the end just for this. So as we jump in, your program is super cool. I know I've talked to you a lot about it, Bill. To give our viewers today just some background, our executive director met you on a prison excursion kind of exploration trip in Norway, if I'm not mistaken, and that is your connection to Desert Waters. And so we've gotten to know Bill through that connection. We're super excited. Can you, as we kick it off here, can you tell us more about how you guys met and how you ended up even collaborating on this project? What did that look like?
Okay, so first of all, thank you to Desert Waters, and thank you for everybody taking time out of their day to join us today from around the country, possibly from around the world. Just a quick correction to Stephanie. I actually met Katerina in 2012.
That's
So
right.
she did she was one of the experts that was talking about correction officer trauma when our state of Massachusetts had put on the first correctional suicide awareness. And that was we didn't get to meet personally, but when Katerina was speaking and I went to see her talk. And so not knowing that later on down the road, we were going to end up kind of crossing over and stuff. And how cool, Norway of all places. So is where I actually got to talk to her and was amazing too. So now to answer your question as far as how did we meet, I'll just tell you real quick. I know Justin said, I started in 2007. And I knew immediately when I walked in the door of this job that I wanted to help people. I grew up in the city of Boston. I have family, I have friends that have been struggling with addiction and trauma, and I've been incarcerated. So I and being in recovery, I think by the time I started this job in 2007, I was 38. So I already had about 18 years in recovery. So it's just a natural thing to want to help other people in recovery. So I was doing that work prior to coming here. So I just thought when I walked through the door, I said, oh, maybe I might be able to impact somebody that's incarcerated, help them in their recovery and addiction. Not really having the kind of knowledge that I have today. But so when I came in, that was kind of my goal right off the offset. Oh, maybe and I obviously know my role as a correction officer, but that one-on-one communication daily throughout, maybe I might be able to change someone's perspective. So I came in, and it wasn't long after, and I realized, wow, it's not just the inmates that are banged up here, it's the officers too. And then I realized it wasn't just the officers. It was just about every single department that works inside a correctional facility was really experiencing that vicarious trauma. And then even more, I had another moment of enlightenment, I guess, when I realized they didn't even realize how damaged they were. And so in my mind, I just said, wow, this job is going to get a lot bigger than I expected when I walked in the door. And so right around 2015, I was asked to join the Employees Assistance Program. We had a team of 3 officers, a sergeant, 2 sergeants, and then myself. And we kind of at the time, we were just more reactive, and we were trying to learn as much as we could about trauma and suicide and all the things that you experience here. And so we kind of attached ourselves to the Department of Corrections Employees Assistance Program because they run full time, and that's their job. Is they go around, they handle whatever 4,000 officers. And so we did a lot of training through them. At the time, it was Sergeant Nisa Leclerc was one of the main ones, all kinds of training. And so through the trainings that we were doing with them, we came across Karen Lachinsky. Karen was doing a training, and she was doing a circle process. And as I was kind of going back in my time when I was looking, and I remembered like the first circle processes that we started to do with Karen, we learned very quickly that if you do not address your trauma, if it goes untreated, she always said it goes into the basement and it lifts weights until it comes out in so many different ways. So because we're correction officers, we would sit in circle and we would whisper back and forth, Karen's trying to get in your basement. Don't let her in. Don't let her in. And so, but we really started to learn like a lot about the circle process, and the circle process was huge for us. And so when I finally got to meet Karen, I remember one of the first things asking Karen, what do you do? And she said, oh, I work with the incarcerated. I work with law enforcement. I work with correction officers. I work with survivors and victims of crime. She pretty much works with everybody. And so, she said, what do you do? And I said, I actually work with officers, but I also do work with the incarcerated. So it was like, immediately there was a connection. She was coming in from one side and I was coming in from the other. And then after kind of getting to know her, I was like, oh, she's solid. She's solid. Like I've never to date met like a sociologist, a professor that wanted to help correction officers. So I grabbed onto that real quick, and and that kind of began our career. Now Karen might have a different story, so let's find out her side of things.
And Karen,
Unmute.
come off mute. I had to mute you for a moment. Sorry.
Oh. Officer Farrell, appreciate you saying I'm solid. Saying that in Boston means a lot. How did I come to work with officers? So I'm a sociologist. I teach full time on my campus, but I was asked to come into a prison, and I was a little hesitant at first, but I was like, yeah, okay. And I walked in and started interacting with some incarcerated men. And I knew immediately that I wanted to teach some sociology classes to these guys. And then I was asked along the way if I would work with some incarcerated men in thinking about trauma-informed programming. And at the time, there was really no restorative justice programming, or I should say restorative justice-inspired programming in Massachusetts prisons. And so I did a lot of research, worked with a lot of people out in California, and ended up bringing restorative justice-inspired programming to Massachusetts prisons. And it really was impactful, not only for incarcerated men, but incarcerated women. And so I was working with that population and also working with mostly mothers, some fathers, but mostly mothers whose kids had been murdered, and going through a long process of bringing people together, the people who've been impacted by harm and the people who did the harming. And sometimes it would be an actual one-to-one in which it was actually that person that committed the harm, but usually it was what we call a surrogate. So I could work with 14 incarcerated men in a group setting with my co-facilitator and bring in, and maybe they committed a homicide, and bring in a mother who lost her child to homicide. Doesn't happen all at once. It's a long process, and people come together. And anytime I had ever facilitated a process like that, it was healing for everybody, including the facilitators. But I had been doing that for a while, and then all of a sudden I had an officer come up to me in a parking lot outside of prison And he said, can some of the officers meet with you? And my first reaction was no. I work with the incarcerated, and I'm like, no. But then I was in the military, and I thought long and hard about why I had said no, and I had to do some reflecting on that. And I saw him again, and I said, "Yeah, let's meet." And so I met. I'll never forget. I met with this particular officer in a pizza shop. It was just him and me, and I took out a napkin after he said the following. He basically said, "We see what you're doing with the incarcerated. We see the positive impact and how it's helping. How come you're not helping us?" And that kind of really was impactful. And that's when I took out the napkin and I said, "Let's draw up a plan." And as they say, the rest is history. I met Bill at a circle, and when the officers first came in, oh my goodness, they saw the circle and what the F is this? And it's like a chair, just sit down. And in the beginning, it was a little rough, like trying to understand, what this is all about. But to me, that they showed up was all they had to. That was louder than words. And then it was a matter of, as we say a lot, trust the process. And Bill was a major person in that. Amazing in terms of creating those relationships and having officers trust each other, trust me. And I don't know, Bill, what is it, like 9+ years now?
2017, Karen, is when we started kind of working together. 2017. So just probably coming up on 10 years.
And for me, it felt so right because I do believe in restorative principles. And for me, what that means is that no one is left outside the circle, no one. And so often officers are left out of the conversation, at least here in the East Coast, in terms of criminal justice reform conversation. And there are many people in which I'll have serious conversations about policy, funding, and I'll bring up officers, and then they'll say, "Why do I want to talk about officers?" And I've learned to understand that it's a matter of education, and it's like, okay, I understand you don't understand, and that's why we should continue the conversation so that you will understand why it's incredibly important to talk about how the officers are so impacted by what I call trauma-rich environments. Like no one escapes it. And officers suffer enormously as a result of that environment. So that's how we met.
Exactly. We like to say here at Desert Waters, all roads go back to staff wellness, and I think that's a great parallel for us in what that looks like and why they should be sitting at the table or sitting inside the ring, as you say. So, can you tell us maybe more specifically, how the boxing piece got added into the program and what the history there was with that?
Want to take it, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kick it off because I think before the boxing had come about, so Karen and I started working together, and Karen was teaching me how to facilitate, and we started working towards bringing the circle process to the department, right? So we have two facilities. We have the House of Corrections, and then we have the jail. And so we don't necessarily always see the jail officers, and they don't see us, but we're the same department. And so after 2017, and we started to move forward, in training and really trying to figure out what we can do for the staff. We did some circles, and as we were learning and as I was growing, it was just natural to say, okay, well, let's see if we can do a circle for staff, right? And so from the 2017 to 2019, we were just working, and when I say working, I'm talking about learning. A lot of the circle process, how to communicate with people, But in our environment, you also have to learn to really like build bridges. And I had been doing that long before I had met Karen. Like I would come into work and I always joke, it's, do you know how hard it is to be kind day in and day out here? And that goes on both sides. It goes to the people that we house and the staff because of the environment that we're in. So I really tried my best as a former Marine to go above and beyond daily. And so it was very challenging, but I can look back now and say, because I did that, I was able to build relationships. I was able to build trust, not with everybody, but a majority. So when Karen and I decided to do our very first circle between the two facilities, we went around and we picked, I looked at certain officers that I thought would be open to come and try this. So I think we ended up with about 14 officers between the two facilities. I had gone to our department and asked would they release these guys to come sit in a circle, and they did. I was blown away. Administration is not usually something administration would do, but they were showing even back then that they were beginning to understand the importance of staff wellness. So we had this phenomenal circle of like officers. And I remember, like, Karen might have a different story, but like, I remember when everything was said and done, Karen had a few other people come in from out of town to help facilitate it, professionals. And they were like, that was a fantastic circle, probably one of the best ones we did. And I think the reason is because um, it was the first time that officers would open up amongst each other. We don't do that. So I'm damaged myself. I know Karen loves this when I get emotional, but
Just breathe, Bill.
no, I know, but you know, I have to go in and out of this environment every day, and I watch people die, watch people drink themselves to death. I'm in my 20th year. It's hard, and I like the job. I love the job. I love the overtime, not all the time, but we're short staffed, but finally for the first time, officers were opening up. They were beginning to realize that they were damaged, and we were just beginning to scratch the surface. So that was huge for us right there. All while that was going on, Karen and a bunch of other officers, we were trying to work on this film that Karen had an idea for. Again, Karen, the sociologist, the professor, had an idea for a film about officers long before I met her. So then when I met her, she was like, I have this idea. I have this filmmaker. And long story short, that began a whole nother process. While we're still trying to build something solid for the staff, we started working on this film. And that in itself was unbelievably challenging. That conversation started in 2018. We had to bring in officers. We met the filmmakers. We had to make sure that the filmmakers weren't trying to make a hit piece on us. We always joked, we do very well on our own. We don't need anyone else to put us on blast. But we obviously trusted Karen, and Karen was vouching for the filmmakers. And so that began this whole process. And so, Karen, you want to talk a little bit about the film before we jump into the boxing?
Sure. I just want to back up and just appreciate you, Bill, for sharing your emotions with folks that you don't know. It takes a lot of courage. And I also want to say, I know Bill uses the word damaged, and I just know for me, it's all about not what's wrong with you or damage. It's just what happened to you. And many officers, just like the incarcerated, just like survivors, have stories. And, what I've seen is that when you give people opportunity to share their story, it can be very, very healing. And I'm what you call visual sociologist. I really do believe with students in my class, it's one thing to talk about, but it's another thing to show, and visually. And so, yes, I had this crazy idea. I really do believe stories are where it's at. And wanted to make this film, but films cost a lot of money, and I don't know anybody. And then I happened to go to a conference in Florida, and I don't know. I was sitting next to a film director. I didn't know it at the time. And we were having dinner, and she says, "What do you do?" And I said, "What do you do?" And I said, I have this crazy idea. And she said, "Really? Like, I'm interested in that topic as well." And it led to a whole process of years down the road, because then you got to raise the money. And then, of course, we have to find officers who are willing to go on camera. And the courage it takes, all the officers who did eventually go on camera were not retired. So the courage that takes, right? And the willingness to tell their story, and honestly, authentically, and go back to work the next day and trust us. As Bill said, everybody was worried, "Oh, it's going to be a hit piece." And it's like, well, first of all, that's not who I am, and it's not the filmmakers that we were working with. And Bill and I had 100% say in what was going to be put on that screen. So. And as a sociologist, I stories are important, but they must have context. What are the social conditions that affect your life? Without that context, it's not going to be authentically a full story, right? So it took so many years and years and years to make that 21-minute film, and we hope maybe at some point we can figure out how to continue on with that story. So that's really how the film came about. And as Bill said, we kept working and working and working, and then building relationships. Why should officers trust me? And that continued, and circles continued, and then COVID hit. And I'll let you talk about COVID, Bill.
Yeah, so just to kind of give a timeline on the film, so 2018, right, is when we started the discussion on the film. We did not start filming till 2021. And a lot of that had to do with just trying to find officers. Like Karen said, nobody wanted to go on film. I couldn't get retirees to do it. And literally in the last effort, I had reached out to Wayne Torres, who's in the film, and said, because I knew his story. And I said, "Wayne, would you be interested in talking to the filmmaker?" And so Wayne said, "Okay, I'll talk to him, but I'm not promising anything." And then Wayne agreed to go on film, and Wayne got two of his officers to also participate. And as Karen said, those officers, and myself included, are still active to today, right? Nobody else would do it. No one else. And so, and I don't blame anybody else for doing it. I'm just saying that this is how hard it was. So we started filming in 2021. By 2022, we had completed this 21-minute film. Then we held on to it, as Karen was saying. So this was the very first part of a larger project that we had envisioned. First part was to bring awareness. How can we fix something if people aren't even aware of it? So that's what the 21-minute film did. We held on to that for another 2 years because it wasn't completed in our eyes, right? And we didn't want people to look at the 21-minute film and say, and think, "Oh, I would never want to be a correction officer," though people don't want to. But so we held on to it, and we did little screenings, where Karen and I could attend and explain what we were doing and how we were doing it. But we could not, no matter how hard we tried, we could not get anyone to help fund a larger project. And so, and Karen knows a lot of people everywhere we go. they know Karen all about. And so we just had opportunities. So we screened it here, we screened it there. And then finally in May of 2025, we released it publicly. And I think right now it's up to close to 16,000 views. And some of the reviews from fellow officers, and has been nothing short of amazing. Because officers will say stuff like, I feel seen for the first time. I feel heard.
Mm-hmm.
And just for the record, I'm not doing this on purpose. This is, as Karen was saying, thank you, Bill, for showing. No, I'm not, trust me, I'm not doing this on purpose. I do not want to do this, but I can look back at all the work, all the effort. And it's so difficult because I'm working full time. We're short staffed. I do double shifts. Karen's a full time professor, and we still just little by little plugged away. But the response back has basically shown that it was the right thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And
It's going to change things.
And if I can just say, we did showed up at the Massachusetts State House, and because we were asked, some amazing folks up there who said, let's show it here. And the room was filled, and it was filled with administrators from the Department of Corrections, the jails, and officers, and then we we screened it at a place in Brookline, Massachusetts called Coolidge Corner Theater, which is a historic theater. And what was interesting is we had some academics there who would have never, had always seen officers as the other, right?
Bad guys.
They're the problem. And I personally invited some folks, and I said, look, I understand where you come from, just come. And they left changed, like they didn't realize. And education does matter, and I think it made it, and I think that's what the film does, is educate. But we knew we wanted to move beyond that. And so you had the pandemic, and we were social distancing, so it was incredibly difficult to continue doing the work. And then Bill was getting calls about officers in distress. And I turn it back over to you, Bill.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen, for pulling me out of that. I appreciate it.
That's all right.
My partner. And yeah, so COVID hit, and it just get to this point where it was just officers were really struggling mental health wise. And we do what we always do. We reacted. People would come, and they were having breakdowns, and we would contact, we get them the resources that they would need. And then what ended up happening is we couldn't find any more therapists. People were full, not taking on any more patients. And Karen and I were still trying to do the circle process type of a thing, but we were doing it by Zoom. And I just remember I called her one day after trying to help somebody that we had nothing. And I said, Karen, we got to do something. We got to do something, like us. I can't reach out to people anymore. It's got to be us. So she said, all right. We talked a little bit. She goes, let me think on it. And then she called me back, whatever. We started talking. She goes, I got it. And I go, what? And she goes, a boxing program with the circle process. And I said, oh, I go, that's good, right? I boxed for 30 years. Karen boxes too. Both of us have at different times read the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And if you are familiar in that whole area of mental health, the trauma getting stuck in the body, he's a big fan of yoga to kind of bring people back to to understand the physical part of it. But the joke was, I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to a correction officer and asking them, hey, you want to come and do yoga? And so But boxing, I said yes. Boxing, I can get officers to say yes, we would love to come do boxing, and that was the idea of I think that maybe was right around 2022 or 2020. I think it was maybe 22, 20. Yeah, that idea came about, and then now, boom, we're going to work on this. And so we both box. Karen was very adamant about it has to be taught by an instructor. Can't be me. I said I could teach it. She just can't be you because it has to have that credibility. It has to be a separation of authority, and and I'm a little resistant, and but I knew she was right, and so we just started. I literally, again, I sought out certain people that I thought might be open to it. I know us very, very well. We do not like to go out of our routine, and that means leaving that front door and going directly home. So we found a boxing gym that's literally just a mile from our facility. It's a very well-known boxing facility in Boston. Peter Welch is the owner of it, called Peter Welch's Boxing Gym. So we went to him and said, would you be interested? This is what we want to do. We want to do a program, and we need a place to sit and circle afterwards. And he said, absolutely. And so, so we started doing the work, and we picked out the people. And I can tell you, I didn't go into detail on the circle process. I just said, after we sweat and we get the cardio and we're sucking wind, we're just going to kind of sit down, check in, see how everybody's doing, check out. And so, so we anything you want to say on that, Karen, from your end?
So it is trauma informed, right? So I've been boxing for 15, 16, 17 plus years, very seriously, still do. But because it's trauma informed, right? As Bill said, trauma gets stuck in the body, and thinking about the biology of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic autonomic nervous system, and how do you, learn boxing, real boxing. Anybody can go into a gym and hit the bag, and that's great, and you work out. That's not boxing. So how do you learn to be very aware of what's happening in your body and learn how to throw a jab, right? Are you stuck in fight, flight, freeze, and so forth? So we meticulously try to break that down. At first, people are not understanding exactly what we're doing, but over time, they move into a deeper understanding. And then, of course, introducing the circle process, which is more than just check in and check out. At first, with the veteran officers, little resistance, but I will tell you that over time, those veteran officers, when we did it with them, they liked the boxing and learning. And becoming aware of the body in ways maybe they hadn't before, and slowing things down. But it was the circle that it was interesting to watch the officers embrace so much and not want to miss that part.
Yeah.
Right. And Bill can tell the story of the officer who worked overnight, made sure that he got there for the last because we run 6 week. We would like to expand to 8 weeks, but right now it's 6 weeks. And I will also say we started to run the trauma informed boxing program with we ran our first one with formerly incarcerated women. And it has really worked well. And it was the first time many of the women were at a gym and just kind of moving their body freely. And again, thinking about trauma informed and the biology of it all. And it worked really, really well. So we're thinking of expanding it to different groups. But I don't know, Bill, if you want to talk about the guy who worked 11 to 7 at night. He came in so exhausted each and every time.
So, so I think to date we did 2 focus groups to kind of see, where we were at and what we were going to do, and I have to just say, so One Voice United helped us fund, because we had to pay for the gym, we had to pay for the instructor, And because we wanted to make sure that this was done and it was done right. And so we did 2 focus groups. We figured out exactly, how to tweak it, and it wasn't too much. We knew what we had. And then we started that first class, and like Karen said, it's 6 weeks. And now keep in mind, we're still short staffed, right? We're still being held 16 hours. I got held last night on a 16-hour shift. So we still have to navigate the job and making sure that we're trying to properly staff, but also continue to run this program. And so, and I would check in with everybody at the end, right? Like, what did you think? Everybody loved the circle process because we've never had a space, right, where we could speak openly about whatever. Like, I just like somebody's kid going off to college. There's nobody in the house anymore. That's a big transformation in their life, right? You don't come into work and say, "Yeah, I'm a little messed up because my kid's leaving," right? Like, we just don't do that here. But so when they realized what how special that space was, and we're not mental health clinicians. We're just providing the space that you can speak freely in amongst your peers. The bond, right? Like everybody loved it. Even this is crazy. On the elevator the other day, we have this combat Marine, right? And he was on it, and I remember when he walked in, he saw that circle, he was shaking, and he said, "I would have never done this if I knew that we were going to do this." And I go, "It's nothing. Just you'll see. Just sit down." And I go, "You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. Just you'll see." And so afterwards, it took him a little bit, but so we were on the elevator, and someone asked us about the program because we're going to be starting it here in our correctional facility. And I said, "Oh," I said, "So and so took it. What'd you think?" And he was like, "It was excellent." He said, "It was excellent," right? But I knew we had a hit because it was the last class. It kind of had gone into the summer. And so there's a lot of people going in different places. And so there was this one officer, and he wasn't there for the last class. And I thought, "Oh, that's too bad. It's the last one. I'm going to just kind of find out how he liked it." So we go through the whole boxing thing. We hit the heavy bags. We're sucking wind. We head upstairs. We're sitting in circle. And one of our supervisors, she also was taking the program. I seen her. She kind of leaned back and she looked and she signaled. And I go, "What are you doing?" And she goes, It's so and so." And he walked in, right? And he was still in his uniform. And he came over and he sat down, and he was exhausted because we were doing 3, 4, and you could see him. He was struggling to stay awake. And he said, "Oh," he goes, "I was stuck last night." And he goes, "I just got relieved and I didn't want to miss the last class." And I said, "Oh," I said, we've got something good here. Yeah, we have something special here." And so, yeah,
That speaks volumes
it
to
speaks huge volumes.
the credibility of the program, the psychological safety of the program, the support that somebody was receiving. We talk a lot of times about how, overtime and mandates are impacting, nationwide right now, corrections all over the place, and people are just exhausted and they're dragging. So for them to even do 30 more minutes or an hour longer in a special activity after work, that screams how valuable and how important that had become, to him. And that's amazing. You guys answered some of my other questions. So I'm gonna skip down a little bit further. What are some outcomes that you guys have seen or lead you to believe that this program is promoting staff wellness? You shared one that we just talked about already. I'm wondering if you've seen other circumstances or how people who have been through the program talk about the program.
We'll take that, Bill.
Karen?
No, I'll let you go.
So because I'm working all the time, I'm always inside. So I'm always interacting. I'm always, grabbing people and stuff. And so I would say that, in our medical staff. So obviously we started this off for us, for officers, right? But, we all know that everybody needs this. And so it was just our initial was the officers, but our long-term goal was to make it available to anyone and everyone that works inside the correctional facility. So what we had was one of the medical providers had heard about the program. And she said, "You guys are doing a boxing program?" And I said, "Yep." And I said, she said, "Can I join?" And I said, let me check. I said, "It's not that we don't want you to join, but I know right now we're working with the officers and we all work together. All the officers, the medical staff, we're all working together side by side, right? And sometimes we all don't get along, and so what better place again to build the bridge?" So I think I mentioned to Karen, I said, "Karen, there was a medical provider. She was asking if she could join the program." And Karen's like, "Sure, why not?" And then we did the courtesy to the officers. "Do you guys mind if so and so wants to join in?" And so they were like, "No, that's fine." So she joined in. And then what was great about that is she's like, "I do a lot of work and she's like, I'm a dietitian on the side. So I do a lot of work with eating healthy and stuff like that. Is that something that you would be open to doing?" And I said, "That absolutely, that's exactly what we would love to do." I said, "You know what? Once you get people to come in and they trust this program, they trust us, right? So now that provides that opportunity to say, guys, what do you think about maybe doing this or this?" And to give you an example on that, Karen is big on box breathing and everything that box breathing does to the body, right? Again, trauma gets stuck in the body. How do we, what can we utilize to regulate that? And so we when we're in the academy too, and I'll explain that, but we do breathing before we once we sit in circle, we do a grounding, we do breathing. So, I wouldn't initially tell you, let's go do yoga, but now that you understand the boxing program, you might be open to some heated yoga. I don't know. So, we've, because the program was, well received and it was getting a good, word of mouth. Our department asked us if we would be interested in running it for their summer choice high school program. So we were like, absolutely. So we actually did, I think it was either a 5 or a 6 week program with high school kids who come in for I don't know, I think it's like a 8 week program or something where they learn all about the criminal justice. From corrections, parole, probation. They go to the courthouses, they go to the FBI, and they get to take the ring resiliency boxing program. So, and then we ask them at the end, "What did you guys think?" They loved it. They loved it. Go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to say that there are a number of ways. I mean, we do post surveys and
Yep.
we get responses that people fill out. But also, I was in the House of Corrections, and I'm walking in. All of a sudden, this big officer, like he's big, slips me off my feet. It's like I'm like, you're squeezing a little too hard, and so forth, right? And it's like, no, that was an amazing, program, and so those are little things that clearly tell me that this is impactful. But I also think learning how, to be mindful of your breath, of course, in boxing, that's incredibly important. But as Bill said, when we do the circle, we do what we call grounding, and we do a meditation, and we do a breathing. And then people over time potentially can lead that process, right? And also, as Bill said, we do this in the academy now, which I think is incredibly important. But we've expanded it, meaning they've given me the opportunity to also bring the officer candidates into a classroom and provide information about trauma. What does it do to the body? And to have conversation It's not like, I'm not going to be testing people like students, but it's certainly more information. So we went from the garage, the boxing, to the classroom. And they've even allowed me to expand on that, right? But also in that circle process, especially in the academy, incredibly important to talk about and just have honest conversation. It's not about, as I'd say to my students on campus, if you're a criminal justice major, it is not about changing your major, but you should. I was talking to State Trooper yesterday. He was coming into my class. And this other officer who knew me said, "Oh, she's going to get you to talk." And he goes, "No, I'm never talking." And I'm like, "It's okay. Like, you do your presentation." And before you know it, there we are. And he's opening up and talking about how difficult it is to bear witness to tragedy. And I'm like, "Do you really want to do this?" And he's like, yeah, I'm good. And so it's a facilitated process. And so when you give an opportunity, what I've seen is people will take it if they feel safe enough. And then you ask afterwards, like, how was that for you? And they're like, you know what, and as he said yesterday, that's the first time I've ever done that. I think what you're doing is helpful to those students, meaning to know what you're getting yourself into. We want you to know how to shoot your weapon accurately. Well, I think you should also know how to take care of yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't help but think, listening to both of you guys talk about this, is that we often talk about the culture of toughness and the culture of silence and all the things that we know exist in corrections culture. And what an outstanding and creative solution to create an inroad to mental health resources, or to, and not even mental health resources, like what Bill was talking about, is just a peer, a safe space to just sit and talk about how, I'm not a robot. I don't just switch off what's going on at home or exposure that I've experienced at work just because I walk through a doorway going one direction or the other at the gate. And what a creative way to introduce the topic of safe space and healing through a sport that is associated with toughness and silence, if you will, because competitors are not speaking to one another, and so how boxing is such a deliberate parallel to corrections culture, but also such a pathway to healing that you guys have created. That's such a unique. When we first heard about it, I was blown away. I was just like, really, because I think a lot of people would consider, like, well, should we really be teaching our officers more, more strategies to punch or more strategies to go hands on? And that's not what it's about at all. And so I love how you guys have taken that, and what a profound way to create an inroad to safe space for your staff. Kudos on that. I'm blown away. I know the burning question of our audience is always this last one, and I want to make sure that I get to it before we run out of time. But it's the one that if a facility or a participant or a department were listening to you today, and they were like, you know what, I want to do that. I want to do that at my department. What is the path forward for them that you would recommend in hindsight, and how you got started, what you would do the same, what you would do differently, what you would leverage? What would that look like, a roadmap for them?
Bill?
So when we presented this to our sheriff a few years ago, he goes, "Oh, I want to run this inside the facility. Can we run it inside the facility?" And I said, "I would love to run it inside the facility." But at that particular time, we were being held over so much. I said, I can't, I know I speak for everybody. I can't get out of here fast enough. I do not want to be here any longer than I need to, right? And that would include boxing program. But what had happened in the time, we, like was just saying we are now in the academy class and we're running this program. I think we're in 4 academies that are now in our facility. And so here's another reason I know this was such a success was that the recruits that are now officers kept asking me, when you doing the program, when you doing the program, and are you going to do it here? And I'm like, we want to do it here. And so I realize now that we had some buy-in. We can get people here to come up maybe at the end of the shift and participate. Say, so our shift goes from 6 to 2, and then come up, change over your sweats, come up 2:30 to 4 o'clock. We get in, and then we're on our way home. We're in a good mindset, hopefully. So I went back to the department and said, hey, I think we have some buy-in now, and I think we could run it here, but we needed equipment. And so, and I will tell you this, our department has been really open to the idea of staff wellness, and they really have helped us out a lot. And I know for a lot of people in the audience, it's still you're butting heads with administration. And we have too, and we don't always get anything. But not too long ago, one of the head people said, make a proposal and submit it. And so I went back to Karen and I said, hey, they said to submit a proposal. So we knew a ring resiliency boxing class, a perfect amount of numbers is usually between 14 to 16. 16 is kind of on the high end, right? But so we could get 8 heavy bags, 2 people on a bag. That gives us about 16 people to participate. I suspect we'd have a lot more that want to participate, and we work our way around it. So then I started doing a little research and everything, and I came to Century Martial Arts. They have a freestanding heavy bag, and I reached out to them, and I know I saw. Oh, yep, Catherine Lopez is on here. She's a part of Century Martial Arts, and I had asked Catherine. Went in there and Catherine was working with me. I said, Catherine, we need, what we ordered for our place was, this is, all right, now listen, we ordered 22 freestanding heavy bags. 8 will go to our facility, 7 go to the jail, and then we have 7 in the academy right now that we're using during when the recruits go in. And then there's a little bumper thing that goes underneath the freestanding to kind of keep it in place. And then we got, I think we got 50 speed ropes for the cardio part of it. So I had asked Karen, Catherine, if you can price me out, say like 8 heavy bags, a handful of speed ropes for, say, your participants, say if you had 16, whatever. So anyways, Catherine sent me a little flyer of what that would cost. And I want to say it's between $3,000 to $4,000 to get the heavy bags and some speed ropes to start your program. So equipment wise, I think that's very doable. I don't know if the department and around the country would pay for it, but $3,000 to $4,000 to kind of get the equipment there is a start. What I did, and then whatever the shipping cost, it would be added for wherever they were going to ship everything to. But if I can pop in the flyer that I had here, I'll put it in here, and Catherine's contact information is on that flyer. People can download it, call her, talk to her. But here's the other part. So for me, in the base, you either put sand or water. So because we had 22 freestanding heavy bags, I didn't want to do water. So I don't know what I was thinking, but we ordered sand. So our department got us 110 bags of sand. And I will tell you, I have this right here.
Hey, I wrote the proposal. You fill it. You fill the sand.
I filled it,
Work.
and I have pictures of me taking this 50-pound bag of sand
And I have
and
pictures of
putting it
me
into
writing.
this little thing. But I will tell you, once it's in, it's great. We have bags upstairs. The big part for people, and then Karen can deal with this, is that circle process. That facilitation part of it is, it's everything, because not everyone can be a facilitator. And it really, Karen, you take that part.
Yeah. So let me just say, it was really important for, like, we had an administrator. I think I think she's a superintendent, right, Bill? Who I'm thinking of, who came. She came to sit in our circle.
Yes.
Well, she came
She's
to
the
watch the whole.
superintendent.
Yeah, she asked if she could come, and we had to really think about this, because now you're changing the dynamic of the circle and so forth. So we asked, and we said why. She wanted to come, and so they said yes. So she came and watched the whole boxing part, and then she sat in circle and really did participate. It was really like she really dropped into the space, and afterwards, she was like, "Yeah, this is really important work." So, I just caution people a little bit. Like, first of all, I think you need to have people who know what they're doing around boxing. No one is hitting anybody. We're not sparring, but still, when you put gloves on people, you want to make sure you have command of that space and that people understand, like, you're not going to go up to somebody and hit them. And this is very different. And in particularly in the academy, where at first they're like, yeah, we're going to hit each other. It's like, no, that's not what we're doing. And so you have to make that very clear, and then it takes a while for people to understand. Oh, I understand this. As you were saying, Steph, this is interesting. It's like you need to, like, you learn how to throw that jab, but why is your elbow going out? And you're like, oh, I don't even realize my elbow is going out. It's like, yeah, because you're not connected to your body. So that's what we're focusing in on. And to facilitate, it's not for everyone. Like, this is not a, I'll just say it's not a bitch session. Like, we're not getting together to, like, the administrator. That's not what it is. It's a facilitated process, which takes skill, and so that folks in that space feel safe enough that they know that the facilitators are holding the space, right? So, Bill went through a lot of training. Prior to Bill, I went through a lot of training. So it's not just like, oh, let's throw some gloves on and then let's just sit. Because that's not what people can do that, but that's certainly not the resiliency boxing program. I mean, when we're thinking it through, it's really mindfully created for a reason. And we try to address that reason. So
I really like to hear that you guys are thinking through the training piece on that, because I think sometimes traditionally, I'm hopeful and I see progress in the staff wellness space in corrections, that we're realizing the value of training. But it seems like, when we started to have those conversations a decade ago, it was kind of like, well, we're just going to implement something, and we can just parallel this on our own. We don't need to go get the training. It's not hard to sit in a circle and just talk. And there's so much more nuance to it and skill to it, that I think over the years we've realized that training is such a huge component of that. So thank you for reminding us and pointing out that, like, this isn't just drag a folding chair across the floor and sit down and that's it, and anybody can do it. Because I think that's where a lot of staff wellness programs meet barriers and wonder why they have credibility problems years later, is that that's a challenge, training. And unfortunately, training requires budgets, and we talk a lot about that too. I'm really glad that you guys had that top-down support when it came to allowing staff to get off their posts, making them available, and that sounds like you guys had good support on that. Are there plans to expand the program in the near future? Where are you going from here?
Well, what's the ultimate plan?
Well, let me just say that to now have the bags in the House of Corrections and in the jail itself is the next step. Like, we're going to be starting, I think it's next Thursday. So we're not, we'll still use Peter Welsh's gym, and Peter is going to come in to the jail in the house as well. But that's a big step. And also expanding at the academy, which incorporates more trauma-informed information.
There you go.
More trauma-informed information, I think is really as an educator, as a teacher, that's where I want to go, and also to run more facilitation trainings for officers, so that they can do more ring resiliency boxing programs that they can facilitate, not just rely on me and Bill. And we won't do it unless there's training, facilitation training. Like we're not going to have an officer, as you said, Steph, like, oh yeah, you can sit in a circle, and no. We need to figure out how we create more spaces for officers to learn the skill of facilitation if they want to do so, because it's not everybody's cup of tea, as they say.
Right.
And then the ultimate, well, I'll let Bill go with that one.
Well, what I would also add too, Karen, is that as we continue to grow this program, right, I'm constantly thinking, how do we utilize the people around us? As a Marine, we utilize our people, right? That's what we do. How do we get more people involved? And for us, we have a lot of talent. We have, professional Muay Thai fighters, Taekwondo, boxing, UFC fighters here. And so I go around and I was just like, would you be interested in teaching one of the classes? Like, you do Muay Thai, like we have the heavy bags. You come and you will teach that physical part of it, like say Muay Thai, whatever.
Trauma informed.
Trauma informed. That's why Karen's here. Trauma informed. And so, and what that does is it gets those guys to come out, and then it allows us to get them into the circle process, so they begin to themselves see firsthand what it is that we're doing. And little by little, you just pull. So when we first started this program, we were working with a couple of psychiatrists from Mass General Hospital. And we were told that there's no way we would get a couple of psychiatrists to sit in circle with us as participants. And so we basically said, you can't ask someone else to do what you're not willing to do yourself. That's something Karen had always said. So we asked them, and they actually came and they sat in, they did the boxing, so and these are some of the people that we worked with. So we're utilizing what we have around us. We didn't have heavy bags when we were doing it in the academy. So I asked officers that had a boxing background to come and hold the mitts, right? And so they would come in. So we're utilizing what we have, and until we can get a better standing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, in a perfect world, we will have a ring resiliency boxing gym where people would be able to come in and participate in a ring resiliency boxing program, and we'll get there.
That is super, super exciting.
Yeah.
I want to thank you both. We're going to head towards closing it out because I want to have time for Q&A before the end of our time with our folks. I want to at least close the back and forth interview that we're doing by just thanking you both for your commitment. People who've worked in the staff wellness space know how hard it is to take a concept and make it a reality, and do it and still have credibility at the end of it. But either from just, it's a hard thing to get a staff wellness program going in an agency where you're being challenged by constant, oversight, politics, the incarcerated's needs, balancing the needs of the staff with the budget that you're given to do it, balancing the needs of all involved, a system that demands reform but doesn't really create situations where that can be successful a lot of times. But you guys have seen this through from concept to all the way to outcomes with people. And I just want to say congratulations. And from us at Desert Waters, we are grateful when we hear about programs like that because it spurs on the rest of us. And so thank you guys for being with us today. And we look forward to having you back because we're very invested now in where this is going. And I know our audience is too. We're very invested in what you're going to do next, from filmmaking to boxing to peer support, to the training, to talking at your state house and doing the things that you've done. I wouldn't be surprised to see you on the Today Show at some point, or maybe whatever whatever, interviewing you about your breakthrough program. And I'm super excited that we got to talk to you today. I see one question in the chat already. And I want to make sure that we get, if anybody does have a question, drop it in the chat now, or I'll give in a couple seconds, you can come off mute and ask it out loud. But we had somebody asking, is the program for all staff or just for your custody staff? Is it for all employees at the corrections agency?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And it should be. And it should be. Yeah.
Great question. Great question.
Excellent question.
Yeah. As we think about, like, anybody walking through those doors is experiencing an impact by that environment. And we definitely feel the same on resource availability and accessibility. Does anybody else have another question before we close out today that Karen and Bill can address? Is there any separation of male and female during sessions or circles? Do you guys separate out?
No.
No.
As a matter of fact, one of our captains is a female, and here was another moment when I realized, oh, this might be a little too much of a success. I got off the elevator, and she started throwing jabs, and she was like, "Shh." And I was like, oh, okay, cool. You like the class, so. But you know what's important is that again, the circle process builds that bond that we need so badly, right? Amongst each other. So no, we would. I mean. I can't speak for Karen, but I would. Everybody's invited in the group. I mean, you certainly could do something for the females if you wanted to focus on the females or the males. Karen, what do you think about that?
We don't separate. It's not how I roll, and you'd be surprised at some of the women.
Some of the women can throw.
They can throw, and they didn't think they could throw. And they didn't think they could do it in the beginning. And at the end,
right.
Because at the end, we go into the ring if we're at the professional jam, and wow, the transformation is kind of amazing. So, there's strength in the gym and there's strength in the circle. And I think that we mirror each other. And I think that's really helpful. So for us, there's no separation.
And I would just say this, right? So anything and everything that you do inside the correctional field is going to meet resistance. And I think it's important to recognize why we meet that resistance. And it's just because we're just very negative, we're angry, we're depressed, right? So, and here's literally a perfect example. So I just said, we're getting ready to start up this program. And this particular person, I was telling a group of people about starting up the program, trying to get people to want to come and participate. And they're like, when is it going to run? And I said, well, we're going to try to run it from, say, 2:30, right at the end of the shift. We're going to start 2:30 to 4. And somebody goes, you're going to fuck up the parking. And I said, perfect. So you got to expect that, right? You're going to expect some resistance. I would say, navigate those conversations with some understanding, and just continue moving forward. Just continue plugging away, little at a time, and you'll get there. Oh, so Mark said he was referring to people opening up in the group, not strength. So, thank you, Mark. Yeah, the women, they're pretty strong. All right, I see Stephanie got it. Karen didn't laugh.
I'm here. I'm just, I'm good.
Yeah. No, I would just say this in the group. I think everybody. I I mean, I think some people are hesitant to open up in the very beginning. Part of the process is, what kind of confidentiality do we have in this group, right? And we maintain that confidentiality. If one person wants to keep it in the group, it stays in the group, and then we revisit that confidentiality the next week. And a lot of times, once we've built that trust, then people would be more than willing to open up. But it's a lot. Everything is trust. So
Any
Awesome.
other questions?
can I?
What?
If Go ahead, Justin.
No, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say. So I talked to an officer today, and he's a little bit older, and he came to the job, and we were talking. Like I go around and I ask like the new people, "Do you like the job? What do you like? Why aren't you smiling?" Right? And so I was talking to him, and he's like, "I love this job." Like he goes, "I can write my own paycheck and everything like that because we're just so short staffed, and you come in and work whenever you want and everything." He goes, "But this place is messed up." So he's 2 years in, right? And I said, yeah, I said, it's definitely a new, unique place because we house men and women, right? And um, so I said, what you have to understand is how you end up changing if you're not aware of that. I said, it can affect you over time. And he laughed and he said that him and his wife get up one morning and she asked him, she said, do you write a lot and work? And he said, yeah, I do. Why? And she said, because you were writing on my back last night in your sleep and you were yelling, don't you play with me? Don't you play with me? And I said, yeah. I said, this job might be affecting you. And then I reminded him when we first started, one of the women that I was working with came up to me. She goes, I think this job is getting to me. And I said, why is that? And she said, I sat up in the middle of the night. I picked up my phone and I said, Officer so and so, 192. And then she realized she was in her bed. And I go, yeah. I said, the job can have an effect on you. So be mindful of it. But yeah, so we just had a little chuckle today. So I would just say to wrap this up, thank you guys so much for this opportunity to share what we were doing. And can I just say something too? Let me end with this. Karen is amazing.
Oh, please.
So she
He can't
refuses
help
to
himself.
acknowledge
Can't help himself.
where we are today and what we've accomplished in the last 9 years. We have a film, like people at the State House call her because they want to learn about something. Karen was the
Steph, can
one
we
that
wrap it
said,
up?
yes. Karen said, yes, I will come to the State House and I will talk to you about restorative practices, but there's another issue that you need to be aware of. And that individual said, what is it? And she said, officer wellness. No company or any place in this country would allow their employees to experience what these people and not address it, right? So Karen, who's not a CO, but in a lot of ways she's too cautious, too suspect of everybody. So she is in a way a very CO, but has really opened so many avenues for us to have
Steph,
these discussions and stuff like that.
wrap it up, Steph.
We need more Karens.
We
Sorry.
need more Karens.
We need more Karens.
Wrap it up.
You see so much on YouTube about, be careful of Karens. I'm glad we have a good Karen out there.
I know.
There's so many
It
good
changed.
Karens actually here. We need more Karens.
I
We
appreciate
do.
that, Justin.
So let me
So, yeah.
Hey, let me just say thank you for everyone showing up today. Thank you for Bill and Karen for your story and your program and sharing it with everybody. We want to invite everybody to our next webinar, which is A Tale of Two Brothers, Changing Law Enforcement Culture, which will be May 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I hope to see you there. I dropped the registration link in the chat, and it'll also be getting sent out. And like I said, the recording will be sent out on YouTube once we get it ready. We're going to end the recording here. And if you'd like to come off mute and ask a question, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful day.